Hello Internet, and welcome to my overview video of the Holy Roman Empire. I know. Last time I promised a video about the fall of Rome and the Western Roman Empire. However, I realized that with a lot of videos coming out dealing with medieval and later European history, I should at least give an overview over the Holy Roman Empire. It hasn't, after all, existed for more than 200 years now, and I feel that even if people have heard about it or even know something about it, there's still some, shall we say, misconceptions as to what it actually was. It was that realm that, towards the end of it, Voltaire rather pithily described it as the Roman Empire, which is neither holy nor Roman or an empire. And while cutting rather deep, it's not completely correct, at least not on the last point. So, yeah, let's take a quick overview over the history of the Holy Roman Empire. Enjoy. The Holy Roman Empire had its foundation in Charlemagne's old Frankish realm. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the late 5th century, the obvious successor kingdom was the Frankish realms in northeastern France and Belgium and Holland. They expanded over the centuries, and around the year 800 under King Charles the Great, who was crowned the first Western Roman emperor in 300 years and who history remembers as Charlemagne, it has reached its greatest extent, covering, well, most of modern day Germany and France, the Benelux, and parts of Italy. The empire remained together under Charlemagne and his son Louis the Pious. However, at that time, the election rules and the inheritance rules created problems, since each of Louis's sons needed to get an equal share of the realm. The kingdom, or the empire really, was broken up into three almost equal parts under his three sons. The eastern part, which transformed later, it was called East Francia, but it turned into the Kingdom of Germany. The western part, which became the Kingdom of France, and the middle part, which, as you can see, covered sort of a stretch from Italy to the North Sea, which was known as Lothering. Eventually, it became the Duchy of Lorraine, but originally it was its own kingdom. These three realms struggled and fought over the next couple of centuries. Several times they were united under a single man, then broken apart again, and eventually the, shall we say, middle of these states, Lothering, basically diminished and vanished, and most of its territory was divided between the eastern and the western Frankish realms, with the eastern, as I said, becoming the Kingdom of Germany, and then eventually in the mid-12th century, the Holy Roman Empire, after acquiring parts of Italy and Eastern Europe and having its king crowned Roman Emperor by the Pope, a title which has otherwise gone sort of shifting between various houses until then. The empire quickly developed into the dominant power of Central Europe, covering physically basically from northern Italy, modern-day Germany, the Benelux area, parts of modern northeastern France, as well as areas of what is today Poland, the Czech Republic and Slovakia, then called Bohemia, and of course the Kingdom of Hungary. They were the great rivals of both the expansions of France and the Ottoman Sultanate in the areas of Central Europe, and fought wars with both, while of course trying to maintain and expand their own sphere of influence while remaining the big boogeyman to several of the smaller kingdoms of Europe, like, for instance, the Scandinavian realms, the various kingdoms of Poland, etc., etc., etc. The empire reached its height of power during the 16th century under Charles V, when he united it and the already very powerful Kingdom of Spain and its holdings in southern Italy and, of course, overseas in the Americas in a personal union, totally dominating Europe like no other realm had or person had, really, between Charlemagne and Napoleon Bonaparte 1,000 years later. He fought several wars with France, defeating them in the Italian wars and even capturing the French king, only releasing him after a very humiliating peace treaty and thus establishing his family, the Habsburg, who was by then the ruling imperial family, in its complete hegemony over Europe for his lifetime. It can be seen on the attached map that there was, combined with the massive, massive, powerful armies under his command, the Empire was at that time simply the most powerful force, well, maybe outside of China, in the world. After his death, however, the realm was split back in two, with each of his sons getting either the Empire or the Spanish Kingdom. In the centuries following Charles, the empire, however, was on a downward slopes. Internal struggles, particularly in the wars of religion, which took place mostly, after all, in Germany, the 30 Years' War and so on, the Protestant rise after the Reformation, which riveted the empire. There was wars with both France, increasing warfare with the Turks. There were loss of the Italian domains. All these weakened the empire. Twice the capital of Vienna itself was besieged by Turkish armies, and it was actually only after the Great Siege of 1683 was broken, and the imperial armies could push the Turks back to the boundaries of Bosnia, Romania, and Greece, that the empire could begin sort of a slow rebuilding, which, however, of course, was constantly set back by more warfare in the east and west and further internal religious dissent between the Catholic south of the Habsburg heartlands and the more Protestant areas of northern Germany and Prussia, who was quickly rising to become the most powerful vassal of the emperor, but also a important kingdom in its own right. And a kingdom not always seeing eye to eye with the emperor, in fact fighting several wars against him, while of course still remaining a loyal member of the empire. Such were the times. Anyway, still controlling most of Central Europe, the empire, of course, remained a first-class power even after Charles, and no one in Europe could afford to either ignore them or just forget them. However, in those centuries, more and more lands were lost until around 1800, when Napoleon, in some of his most brilliant military campaigns, absolutely smashed them. And in 1806, the empire was dissolved, with the emperor instead founding the Austrian Empire, with a bigger focus on the Balkans and Central Eastern Europe and Northern Italy, rather than the old heartlands around the Rhine Valley and the Kingdom of Germany. That empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was, of course, finally dissolved after being on the losing side of the First World War. So what made the Holy Roman Empire different than most others? Well, first of all, it was in fact a true empire, consisting of various kingdoms, dukedoms, princedoms, whatever. Basically a patchwork of states comprising the German domains with other kingdoms around Europe, overall under the Holy Roman Emperor. We had the kingdoms of Bohemia, Germany, Hungary, and Italy, and the small German northern princedoms and the Rhine states. The emperor himself rarely held more than one or two of these, usually often in the early days the kingdom of Bohemia and the kingdom of Germany, while later it became mostly, of course, still the Kingdom of Germany, but also beyond that, the Kingdom of Hungary and the Archduchy of Austria when the Habsburg took over the empire. The emperor was usually elected as king of Germany, which always remained an electorate kingdom, and then in the early years needed to be crowned by the pope as emperor. That, of course, resulted in long periods without an emperor in the empire, and as we saw in my videos about the Council of Constance, that was one of the primary points of Emperor Sigismund's desire, or rather King Sigismund at the time's desire, to have the Great Schism resolved so he could actually be elected emperor at that time. However, by the time of Charles V, the succession could reliably be expected to go to whoever the emperor chose as his successor, and the papal crowning was no longer used, at least not as a necessity. This, ironically, while it increased the prestige of the ruling house of Habsburg, it also weakened the personal authority of the emperor inside the empire, as it, to a certain degree, removed the sort of personal bonds of loyalty between the various German rulers making up the empire and the emperor that they no longer themselves actually elected and thus held a sort of personal interest of loyalty to. As you can see in the map I have put in above, this was basically Germany at the time, so you can imagine that keeping the loyalty of the various German princes was paramount and at the same time really difficult. This was also why the internal splits eventually grew greater and greater and finally invoked the quote from Voltaire. The 30 Years' War was in many ways basically a civil war within the empire, as its northern Protestant princes fought the Catholic South, though of course it wasn't the emperor against his subjects, but the Austrian Archduke, who also happened to be the emperor, against other sovereign rulers. Yet another example of its imperial yet non-imperial status of this particular realm. The Holy Roman Empire, as we can see, was a complicated realm riveted with internal strife, waxing and waning in power, but overall it presented the somewhat united front against Central Europe, against the other European powers for most of its existence, and was basically sort of the usual counterweight to either the Turkish invasions or the French pretensions of power, hell, even the Spanish pretensions of power, despite its connections between the two Habsburg royal houses. And it was certainly a realm that no one in Europe could either ignore nor hope to forget. So overall, I hope this have served to explain some of the peculiarities that later videos will refer to when either mentioning the empire or directly dealing with it. Well, I hope this gave a sort of at least decent overlook over the Holy Roman Empire, which will help a lot in understanding some of my later videos. If not, let me know and I will try to clarify either in the comments below or in perhaps another video. At least this means people will not be on completely bare ground when I mention the empire going forward. If you have any interest in the subject, it's definitely worthy of a study as a very interesting part of European history on its own, and certainly, as I said, not a period or an empire or a realm worth ignoring in the greater historical sense of Europe's development. Next time, I will try to get to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the late 5th century, but of course, it might take a while, as I certainly have other videos planned as well. Until then, I have been the Sage, and I wish you all a very happy day.